the French would want to see Mustafa. So that was part of the process, but in actuality, and then I can remember joking, we walked out to the car, and it was probably 3:30 in the morning, and I said, somebody's going to write a doctorate in film on where that stoplight goes. And we should remember how we did this, right? But that was the that was the process. I mean, it was what's so great about David as a filmmaker is that there's all these technical things that he doesn't get credit for, in the sense of how you edit and how you cut, from scene to scene. Stoplight being one. He has this great thing that you see all the way through the series, and you see in other movies. He will, for you guys who are filmmakers, there'll be a scene. Say it's a discussion, right? Discussion, and then suddenly someone like me talks too much and it gets boring. Then what he does is he cuts outside. Suddenly there'll be a shot of like a Galen Center, right? And then they'll go back and he's jumped over the page and a half that sucked, right? And he's back on target, and he does it all the time. And it's the simplest trick, but he does it so brilliantly. Do you know what I mean? And you can see it in Good Weeks all the time. There'll be a chat, and then whether it's the writing or the direction or whatever it was isn't working, and suddenly we're outside at the stoplight or the shot of the forest or the shot of the house they're in.
Or the ceiling fan.
Yeah, the ceiling fan. Yeah, he goes somewhere, right? There's a we were mixing the series we did after it on the air. And there was a scene where just a terrible scene that I'd written. It was just awful, and we were mixing it, and there was two guys were talking in some building, and it was just awful scene. But the establishing shot was of a guy on the street. It was like a public domain picture of New York, and there was a guy with a jackhammer, right, pounding on the sidewalk. So what David did is he went in and he shot the first part of the scene that kind of worked. We established it with the guy with the jackhammer. We went in and saw the two guys talking, and then right when the scene got boring, we cut back outside, and suddenly the guy with the jackhammer was 10 times too loud, right? So like this, so that when we went back in, you couldn't hear what the two people were saying in the scene. Right? And it was wonderful, and it kind of it was something that was funny again. But that's the process. Right?
So I'm going to ask this with a bit of willful ignorance. Can Sheryl and James, can you talk about working with Moira and what sort of circumstances led her to be cast?
I came in and when she was already there. Everybody was already cast, and they were all from most of the other actors. There were only a few of us that were up in Seattle, and everybody else came from LA in the pilot. So, I was really young and really green, and I just loved Laura. She was so funny and she was so experienced, and I'll never forget the first day, my first day on set in the pilot, and I got there and there's somebody there saying, "Oh, hi Sheryl, come over here," and I was like, wow, that's nice, they know my name. And then I go to the next place and they'd say, "Oh, hi, here, come sit here," and then they'd say, "Do you want," and I said, well, somebody said, "Do you need anything?" And I said, "Oh, could you just tell me where the water is?" And they said, "Oh, no, don't worry, you just stay here at where the little honey wagon trailers are, and we'll get you some water." Laura was standing right there, and I was like, oh my gosh, everybody's so nice, that they want to bring me water and I don't have to go get it. And she's like, "Oh, honey, they just want to do that so they know exactly where you are all the time." It just was like, she was so fantastic in that way for me, because I did, this whole world of TV and film was so completely new to me, and I don't know how she got cast, but I had an awesome time working with her.
With Lara?
Yeah.
I wanted to know about working with Moira, because it's a great story.
Okay, I'm so schizophrenic when it comes to this show. You gotta remember, I played two characters, the seasons and then the film, and it all just kind of, but in my mind, they're the same person, Moira and Lara. Okay. I don't know how Moira got cast, but I love Moira and had actually worked with her before the film as well, but I don't know how she got cast. But she's...
But, wait, how was that experience to have someone else inhabit that role?
Well, she was fantastic. I mean, you know, I applaud her for coming in at that time, you know, when that show was what it was, and to be able to come in and bring such heart and soul and do such a beautiful job. That I can't imagine how difficult that would be as an actor, and she did it exceptionally well. She was wonderful.
I want to start to open this up to the students, but before we do that, does anyone have any particularly favorite stories from working on the show?
One thing I just would like to say, and you guys may have heard this before, so forgive me if you have, is, you know, along the lines of what Bob was talking about with David, he would be so specific. We could be shooting a scene in the diner and he would come in and he'd, you know, look at the table between us and move the water bottle that much, and then come over here and move this water bottle that much. You know, his eye sees the world like a photographer's eye or a painter's eye. At the same time, there's this understanding and this ability to work with the creative force that is bringing us all together, that is bigger than each of us individually, so that when something happens that might appear as a mistake or as if it's not supposed to happen, he is able to, in that moment, open to it and take the time to investigate, is there something here? And if I could pass anything on to young film students, it would be to stay true to that, to give yourself the time to investigate and explore something that happens out of the ordinary, or that happens, you know, there's the famous scene in the morgue where the lights are broken, you know, and the electricians went to David and said, we don't know, it's going to take us, you know, however long to fix the lights, and David stands back and looks at it and says, leave it, and it turns out to be such a huge part of that scene, and there's story after story after story on the whole set, on the film, like with Bob, you know, working with him over and over, of these things that happen like that, where because he was open to exploring them, added this whole other layer of magic. It's like he's friends with the creative force, and so the creative force steps in and plays with you.
And I think not very, at least in my experience, not a lot of specific direction, but he would spend a lot of time creating a mood, and constantly getting yelled at by Deepak for taking way too long, just telling stories to the cast in the little cabin. Just, I don't know how long we were in there, where he was just telling us stories not related to what we were going to film at all, but just creating a mood until he felt it was right, and then he would go.
So if you'd like to ask a question, if you can just line up towards the front of the auditorium. And Bob, would you mind handing off your mic to Ben?
No, I'm not.
And Ben, you can just give it to the students as they ask.
Did you want a message? Did you want a message? No.
Hi.
It's the Exodus.
I'm not
This
standing
is
like this.
the Exodus.
I thought you said The Exorcist. Okay, I guess I just want to say, first of all, I mean, I'm a huge Pete geek, have been since I was 12 years old, first saw the show. And seeing this movie on the big screen for the first time in what, how many years is this? I don't know. I saw it on opening night, and as I get older, it means so much more to me. So thank you. But I guess this is a question that I felt I should ask, because I don't know if I'll ever get another chance to ask it. Maybe it's a question for Bob, perhaps, for Jennifer, who's gone, right? So, but the question is, okay, so spoiler alert, we all know what happens to Dale at the end of the series. He goes in. We know that, this is going to sound like total geek, just rant, but just bear with me. Episode 2, we know that he's been in there for 25 years, so he was sort of destined to go into the Black Lodge. It's not some sort of thing you dropped on us in a way, he was always going to go. Okay. Now, Fire Walk With Me is a prequel, but we all know that time sort of moves forward and back in the Black Lodge. It's cyclical. It's Native American philosophies. So, in a way, my question is Fire Walk With Me actually a sequel? Because once you've been in the Black Lodge, you've always been in the Black Lodge. And now that we follow him, Annie says in the bed, and I believe it's also in the Laura Palmer's diary, the good Dale is in the Black Lodge. Agent Jeffries comes in, points at Dale, and says, "Who do you think this is? Who do you think this is there?" Dale does not yell to Gordon. He just says, "It's August 15th." And he speaks very softly, and Gordon hears him. And I'm wondering, and that when Dale's coming in and he's looking at that camera, and he's going back and he's looking at the monitor, and he's coming in and he's looking at the camera, and he goes back and looks at the monitor. He comes, looks at the camera, back at the monitor, and he sees the elevator door open, and he sees himself, if that is the good Dale, looking at him and saying, "Dude, we're coming for you." That's all.
What were we saying about PhD dissertations? Who wants to tackle that one?
You see, there isn't an answer to that, other than that we talked a lot about that there are other realities to life. There's a person just like you who's living your life that is just behind you, and there's another person living your life that's just ahead of you, right? And that goes back to the part that it's a dream, right? I mean, if you see those movies as I can't speak for David, obviously, but I mean, if you look at the movies I did with him, as they're a dream, So it's what seriously it's what you should take from it. Do you know what I mean? That there isn't an answer. You know what I mean? But that's clearly the same thing of him seeing himself in the elevator. It's very much the same thing as it in Mulholland, The Lost Highway, where he's talking to somebody, he's on the phone.
Right, Lost Highway.
Right, Lost Highway, right. It's the same. Do you know what I mean? It's the same discussion, right? But there's not an answer to that. Other than the number 4.
So, on that note of Black Lodge lore, how does an angel sneak into the Black Lodge? It seems like it would be a treacherous place.
You see, well, here's the deal. The minute you would say to David, "Well, here's the rules about the Black Lodge," you're looking at a brick wall. That's not a rule, right? There are no rules, there are no formulas. It's the same thing about great movies. There's no rules.